wonderful day. I hope you're having a wonderful day. We continue, we left off 32b, Pesachim 32b on the bottom. Last line. So we learned yesterday, the Gemara started saying that Rabbi, who also changed his mind. Rabbi says that according to Abba Shol, you need both. You need, in order, when are you obligated to pay the penalty of eating truma? If it's a kezayis and it's worth a penny. As he argues, the Tanakh, the rabbis hold that all that matters is it's a kezayis. Doesn't matter if it's worth a penny or not. And if it's less than the kezayis, even if it's worth a penny, you're not obligated. And if it's kezayis, it's not worth a penny, you're obligated. That's the only criteria. And Abba Shol argues, and he says, no, you need both. I agree with you, it has to be a kezayis, but it also has to be worth a penny. But then the Gemara says, Rabbi himself reversed his opinion. At the end, he agreed that according to Abba Shol, all that matters is that it's worth a penny. Even if it's less than a kezayis, you also have the penalty. So the Gemara, what's the proof? So he brought a proof because we learned in the Braisa. That in the case of Me'ilah, if a person intentionally benefits from the temple treasury, then you exempt from a sacrifice, a special sacrifice. When you enjoy and benefit from the temple treasury, you have to bring, in addition to repaying the temple treasury, the principal, and repaying the penalty, 25% on top of it, you also have to bring a guilt offering, a sham me'ilas. So he says it's only if you do it unintentionally. If you do it intentionally, you're exempt. And why? How do we know this from? Because if other mitzvahs, all the other cases where you have to bring a sin offering, if you would have done it intentionally, you only bring a sin offering, you do it unintentionally. If you do it intentionally, you're exempt from a sin offering. And there, it's more strict. It's much stricter than the case of using a temple treasury. Because there, if you do it intentionally, your life gets cut off. In the case of using a temple treasury, you only get the death in the hands of heaven. So if there, the Torah exempts you from a sin offering if you do it intentionally, how much more so in this case? And then he says, but maybe not. Maybe, on the contrary, maybe that if you enjoy the temple treasury, that's stricter. Because here you get death in the hands of heaven. There you only get death in the hands of Karis. So right away the question is, what do you mean? You're contradicting yourself in the same breath. Here you just made a compelling logical argument because you took it for granted, your assumption is, and that's all our assumption. Karis is much stricter. And nevertheless, if you do it intentionally, you're exempt from a sin offering. How much more so in the case of benefiting from the temple treasury, that where it's a lesser penalty. It's only death in the hands of heaven, which is lesser than having your life cut off. How much more so if you do it intentionally, you're exempt. You're only obligated if you bring it unintentionally. If you do it unintentionally. Now all of a sudden you say the exact way. Wait, he's saying the exact opposite. That death in the hands of heaven is worse than having your life cut off. So Rav Nachman by Yitzchak Rav Chia, but Avin answered, and he said, this is what he means. This is what the Braisa said. The Braisa said that you can't bring a proof. You know why all other sin offerings, when you eat something prohibited, you have to bring a sin offering only if you do it unintentionally. If you do it intentionally, you're exempt. Because there, when do you get when does your life get cut off? Only if you eat a kezayis. But by Me'ilah, the Torah doesn't mention eating. The Torah says you're not allowed to benefit from the temple. So even if I eat less than the kezayis, your life gets cut off, as long as it's worth a penny. Doesn't matter if it's less than the kezayis, as long as it's worth a penny. If you do it intentionally, your life gets cut off. So therefore, I mean, you get death in the hands of heaven. So therefore, maybe here it's stricter, since we find that meal is stricter than all other prohibitions against eating. So therefore, maybe here you have to bring a guilt offering, even if you do it intentionally. And that's why the Brisa concludes. The Torah tells me bishgaga. The Torah has to tell me clearly that you only bring a guilt offering only if you do it unintentionally. So Rabbi Nachman by Yitzchak said to Rabbi Rabbi, thank you because you settled my mind. You answered my question brilliantly. So he responded right away. So Rabbi Rabbi said, why are you satisfied with my explanation? This is very funny. He himself gives the explanation and then he himself refutes his own explanation. So what was he thinking in the first place? How does he refute?
They chopped it up and said it's no good.
How does he refute his reputation? Because Rabbi Rav Sheshes shut the Benarige. Rabbi Rav Sheshes threw in an axe, dismantling the whole thing. Right. What's the? How do they dismantle this argument? Man, shamet ladam hazel milam misa. Where do you know who's the one who holds that if you benefit from the temple treasury intentionally, you get death in the hands of heaven? Not everyone agrees with that. It's the sole opinion of Rabbi. That's the opinion of Rabbi. Rabbi says you get death in the hands of heaven. The rabbis disagree. The rabbis say no, there's no death involved. It's only lashes.
Right.
My time of the Rebbe. What's the reasoning of a Rebbe? What's his source? Rabbi says because Gamar he learns chet mitruma, because it says by truma chet sin, and it says by enjoying from the temple treasures. It also says chet. So matruma b'misa, just like if a Yisrael, an Israelite, a non-kohen eats truma, you get death in the hands of heaven. So have meila. If you enjoy the temple treasury intentionally, you also get death in the hands of heaven. So, according to Rabbi, since you learn Me'ila from Truma, so therefore learn everything from it. Umina, Ma Truma, Bekazayis, Amila Bekazayis. I'll tell you the same thing. Just like Truma, when do you get death? When do you get the death in the hands of heaven? Only if you eat a Kazayis. So too, by Me'ila, it's only if you eat. If you eat from the temple treasury. A kazayas, it's not enough it's worth a penny, it has to be also a kazayas. So therefore it's the same, there's no difference. So how can you refute? What's the Brais you're telling me? He's saying the Brais is refuting and saying, here I have a compelling argument. Why do I need a pasuk to tell me that you only have to bring it in the case if it's unintentional, but if you benefit intentionally, you don't have to bring a guilt offering. I know that with compelling logic. If in the rest of the Torah, which is kares, if you do it unintentionally, you're exempt from a sin offering. How much more so in this case, which is only death in the hands of heaven, how much more so that if you do it intentionally, you don't have to bring a guilt offering. And they can't respond, wait, we find a strictness by Meila, which we don't find by the other prohibitions against eating, which is a kazai, even less than a kazayis. It's not true. According to Rabbi, it's a kazayis, just like the Ruma, yeah.
And it has to be according to Rabbi because we're talking about Misa.
Right, exactly. It actually points out everyone holds of this Gezerah Shava. Even the rabbis who disagree with the Rabbi, everyone holds of Chet Chet. There are many things we learn from it. But they don't learn the death. That we don't learn from it. Because it says clearly by Truma, Mesa Boy. Boy means only by Truma they have death in the hands of heaven to exclude Me'ilah. Maskelo Rapapa, and Rapapa asked on this question. Rapapa asked on Rav Sheshes. And Rabbi Rav Sheshes that threw in this axe and refuted this argument. Rabbi says, wait a minute. Why are you asking? Why are you refuting this argument? How do you know Rabbi holds like the rabbis? Dilma Kabashol. Maybe he holds like Abishol. Abishol says that by Teruma, even if it's less than a Kazayas, you also get death in the hands of heaven, as long as it's worth a pruta.
Okay.
The Amar Yesh B'Shavah Pruta, I've got less B'Kazayas. For Rapapa, Damed Abishol Tarti Boy, Rapapa just told us that according to Abishol, he needs both. It says Va'achal and V'nasan. He has to have an amount of achila, which is a kazayas and V'nasan, a significant amount. He's a charaya, Elishmami no. It's clear that he changed his mind. Rapapa took it back. So according to the rabbis, the only criteria is eating by truma, which is a kazayas. Doesn't matter if it's worth a pruta or not, and even if it's worth a pruta, if it's not a kazayas, you're exempt. And if it's a kazayas, even if it's not a pruta, who cares? The main thing is the eating. And according to Abishol, the only criteria is pruta. Is it worth a penny? It's not worth a penny. It's worth a penny even less than the kazayas. And if it's a kazayas, it's not worth a penny. Then you didn't violate the prohibition of eating truma. And meila, we learn from that. And according to Rabbi, meila would be the same thing. Now the Gemara is going back.
In the original Kal V'chomer, Shar Mitzvahs, does that include Truma?
Yeah. Any prohibition of eating.
I'm just saying, so with Poyol, even if whatever we went like, once we're comparing Truma to the Ilah.
No, but that's what Shada Ben Narya is. Right. Now,
I'm saying, so
now,
even
okay.
Puppers.
Right. So the question remains: how do we explain the B'raisa? It's a good question. So how do you explain the B'raisa? The B'raisa is changing its mind. You can't say it's changing his mind. We know that Karas is more severe. So the question remains: why taka do we need a pasuk b'shgaga?
Right.
And you can't. What are you answering me? You answering me because here it's less than the kazayas. Here it's different. No, it's the same. That's the Rebbe's opinion. Therefore, it would be the same. So now we have another two explanations. Now the Gemara is going to give two explanations of the B'raisa. Mar b'rei deravina, mar hachikamer. This is what the B'raisa is saying. Lo yimamret b'shar mitzvahs. I can refute this logical logic because I can say other mitzvahs. You know why the Torah says if you do it intentionally, you don't have to bring a sin offering because of the year. Shali also ben shein miskaven ki miskaven. Other mitzvahs we don't compare if you do it without intention to if you're doing it with intention. For example, in miskaven lachazol. Let's say Shabbos. You have in mind to cut. Your intention is to cut, but to cut what? To cut talush, to cut something that's already cut. There's no biblical prohibition to cutting something that's already cut. The biblical prohibition is cutting something that's attached. But you end up you end up cutting.
It is attached.
You end up cutting what is attached and desecrating Shabbos. Shapata, you're exempt because it's malacha because that wasn't your intention.
Right.
Torah says it has to be malachas machshavas, intentional work, creative work. Taimer b'miila. So therefore, over there, since all the other isurim in the Torah, if it is no kavana, you're exempt. It's not called a sin. So therefore, there the Torah is lenient. The Torah says if you do it intentionally, you don't have to bring a sin offering. But Taimer b'miila, how could you compare it to miila? In the case of enjoying the temple treasury, shem niskaven lischame begizei chulim, your intent was to warm yourself up. But warm yourself up with what? With something that's permissible, with shearings of chulin, which is allowed. When it's chamen, at the end you warm yourself up with shearings of oila. So that's meila. Shemal, Yemoil. So since meal is so strict, this meal is unique. We don't find this strictness anywhere else in the Torah. So maybe the Torah is also strict that even if you do it intentionally, you have to bring a guilt offering. That's why the Torah said, "Tell me, b'shgaga." That's how he explains it. That's a Marbrei the Ravina, the son of Ravina, explained it. Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak explained it this way. Hachikam. Lo yimamrit b'shar mitzvahs. You can't compare to other mitzvahs in the mischayev and she'em misasek and misasek. Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak argues. Nachman bar Yitzchak argues with the Marbrei the Ravana. He says that throughout the Torah, in the case of the case that we just learned, you would be chayiv because it is called intentional because your intention was to cut. Yes, to cut talush, and you ended up cutting something that's attached, but your intention was to cut. Your intention was to do a malacha. So therefore, you would be obligated. It's called meleches machshavas. It was creative work. You're intending to cut. It was a mistake. He ended up cutting something that's attached. Fine. But what's a case where other mitzvahs you're exempt, like with Shabbos you're exempt? You know what the example is? Misasik. Misasik is more than just I didn't intend. For example, Shem Niskaven like Biazatolish. I never intended to cut. I intended to lift up something that's detached. And I ended up cutting and I ended up cutting something that's attached. That's misasik. Misasik is like an accident. It's like you walk out on Shabbos, you're carrying something you don't even know that you're carrying. There's completely no intention there. There's zero creative, zero knowledge. I'm not even thinking about cutting. It's the farthest thing in my mind. Who's thinking about cutting? I'm thinking about picking something up. I wanted to pick up the knife. I wanted to plant it. The knife was there, and I wanted to pick it up. And then I ended up cutting something that's attached. So it's two things. I was intending to pick up something that's detached, and they ended up cutting something that's attached. It's so far out. It's so not in my consciousness at all. Then you're exempt. You're going to say the same thing by meal. By meal, you see, is unique. It's different. Little chayvet. You intended. You're also misasik. You put your hand into the pot because you wanted to take something. And you didn't know that the vessel was filled with oil, holy oil. And you end up anointing your hands with holy oil. Shemal, the halacha says, you use the temple treasury and you're obligated. So since there's such a strictness, by Meila we don't find anywhere else in the Torah that even misasik is obligated. So therefore I would think maybe even intentionally also obligated to bring a guilt offering. Guilt. So he says, no, that's why the Torah told me no. Taisus points out when he says his intention was, in the first case, to cut the detached, and he cut something that's attached, he doesn't mean something else, because we learned in Shabbos that even two things that are attached, if my intention is to cut this and I ended up cutting this, it's also not called Melechus Moshevis. He means to say his intention was to cut something that's detached. He thought it was detached. It turns out that it was detached. It was attached. So his intention was the thing that he actually cut. That was his intention. But he thought it was detached. He didn't realize that the thing the object of his intention was actually attached. So nevertheless, he's exempt. Because since his intention was, he thought it was detached, he didn't realize it was attached. And nevertheless, it's okay, so that's the explanation of the Brais. Fine. Amamar. Now we go back to the Brais. Amamar. So we learned yesterday, that what type of chametz? When could truma become chametz? When could the chametz how could you have a scenario of truma that's chametz? So the Braisa said, the only scenario, the only way you can have truma that's chametz is first you separated truma before it was chametz, and then it became chametz. But if you separated chametz, was already chametz, and made it truma, it never becomes truma. It can't become truma. Where do we know this from? How do we know this? Because it says in the pasuk, because the pasuk says you have to give the truma to the kohen. So loy means you have to give it to him. He can eat it. Not if he can't eat it, he can only use it to light, to use as fire, as fuel. Was even if you're going to say, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, you're allowed to benefit from chametz and Pesach, but you could only use it for fuel.
Then why can't you consecrate it?
Because it's not qualified to be able to be given to the kohen for his usage, for his eating, then it's not truma. You can't make it truma. It's only qualified as truma if it's you're able to give it to the kohen to his personal eating.
Oh, for personal
eating,
I see.
right.
So for personal eating, right.
Yeah. So the Taisus says this is according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili. According to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, says you're allowed to benefit from truma. You're allowed to use it as fuel when you're getting rid of it. But according to the others, you don't need this verse. Because firstly, you're not giving him anything. Titin loy, what are you giving him? If it's aser bana, I'm giving him dust. I'm giving him zero. Or what are you? Titin, give him. Has to be worth a penny, something. Give him. I'm not giving him anything. Also, we learned yesterday that it has to be something that could become kodesh. You have to give him something that could become kodesh. I'm giving him chametz. Chametz can't become kodesh because chametz. It can't become truma. Chametz cannot become truma.
Why can't you consecrate it and say with a stipulation that it doesn't become consecrated to the
It's on
weekend
Pesach.
of
It's on,
Passover?
it's on Pesach.
No,
It's already chametz. We're talking about something already became chametz.
It's already chametz.
It's already chametz.
Oh, it's already chametz.
On
It's
Pesach, it's already
so-
chametz, and you give it to them on Pesach. You get- Okay, so he says, not so Rabbi asked. We learned in Taimim you're not allowed to separate truma from impure truma, from impure produce with tahira. But what if you went ahead and you did separate truma from tmeya b'shegeg? If you did it unintentionally, truma to truma. Why is the truma valid? Why is it good truma? Since the truma is, since the produce is tamei, the kohen can't eat from it. He's not allowed to, he cannot allowed to eat truma tameya. So how does it qualify as truma? Since the kohen can eat from it, yes, the only thing he can do with it is he can use it as fuel or as lamp. But you said loy, it has to be worthy of him, for him to eat. It has to be edible to eat. So therefore, it shouldn't be truma even after the fact. Even afterwards, it shouldn't be. How could it be truma? And with the Gemara like kasha, it's not a contradiction. There, at least, there was a time when it was permissible before it became tamei. Here we're talking about there was never had a moment when it had the possibility, the potential to be okay. For example, how can the ichmas be mechuber? While it was still attached, when it was still attached, it became chametz. In other words, let's say fully ripe kernels. It was fully ripe, but it's still attached to the ground. And then it became wet and it started becoming chametz. So, but truma, you can't give truma with something that's attached. The Torah says the gancha means something corn that gives kernels that you gather together, you bundle together, you gather together. So the moment you cut it, it was already chametz. The moment it became truma, it was already chametz. It didn't have the possibility, the potential of it being loy, of it being qualified to eat. In the case of regular truma, tmeya, that means it was a time it wasn't tummy. The produce wasn't tummy, so at least it had the potential. So even now it became tameh, since once upon a time it had the potential to be given to the kohen in a state of purity. So therefore, it's a valid, legitimate truma if you separate it from the truma. But in this case of chametz, since it never had the potential, if it became chametz while it was still attached, it never had the potential to become truma. Therefore, it's not a good truma. It's not a valid truma. If you separate it, it's chametz, it's not a valid truma. But are you telling me that if it became chametz after it was detached, then you could make it truma? So he said yes. He said yes. Yes, I'm saying yes, exactly. So Nachman by Yitzchak said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Because it is Irin Pisgama. This is by the decree of the sayings of the Irin, the ones who are awake. It refers to Malachim, who never sleep. And by the saying of the holy ones, also an expression of the angels. the ruling by the words of the holy ones. And that's how they teach, and that's how they instruct in the base of Medrash accordingly. That's how they pass. Came Omar. He said, we continue on side B. Amakra, it says, Reishis. He gives another reason. He says, we know. In other words, he disagrees. Rav Huna ben Rav Yeshua is disagreeing with Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. He holds that even if the produce became chametz after it was detached, still in all, the Bryce is saying you can't make it into truma. If you separate truma, it's not valid truma. Where do we know this from? Because it says, Amakra reishis reish is the gun. You have to give the beginning, the first. It means, but the leftover, it has to be leftovers. The leftovers have to be useful and beneficial to the Yisrael. The Truma has to allow the reishis, the first that I'm giving away to the Kohen, has to allow the leftovers to be usable by the Yisrael. Here, you can't use it. The Jew can't use it on Pesach. It's chametz. You're not allowed to eat from it. And you're not allowed to benefit from it. In the beginning, no, and even according to Rabbi Yisrael Glili, in the beginning when it was tevel, I wasn't either allowed to eat from it. I was allowed to benefit from it, but not eat from it. So what changed? Now that I gave truma, if chametz is the same thing, I can't eat from it, but I can benefit from it. So nothing changed. You can't tell. It has to be that the truma made a difference. The truma has to change the status of the produce for the Yisrael. Here, the truma didn't change the status of the produce for the Yisrael. Before the Yisrael, when it was tevel, before he separated truma, he wasn't allowed to eat from it. He was allowed to benefit from it, and now he's not allowed to eat from it. He's allowed to benefit from it. He didn't make any change. So therefore, that's not truma. It's not a valid truma. If the truma doesn't affect that change, then it's not a truma. That's what he's in. Yosef Rabbi came with Rav Chisda. Rabbi sat in front of Rav Chisda. Yosef, when he sat, the reason he says twice he sat, first he stood up and he said he had a question. When they acknowledge him, no, you want to leave it open? You don't want to? Yeah. There's no school and someone is coming. I want to. And then he sat down and asked his question. Yosef Amar, and he said, "Mishmei Rabbi Yechanan, Anovim, we learn Anovim shenitmu, grapes that became tamei, doichen pachas mikebeitza. You're allowed to squeeze them if it's less than the size of an egg. And v'yein kosher l'sachem, and the wine is kosher. Why? Alma we see, because somebody holds mashkin mifkat pkidin. That's the halacha. There's an argument. Do we look at the grape juice in the grapes? Is it part of the fruit? It was considered like one item. The shell of the grape, together with the wine, with the grape juice, is considered like one. Or is it considered like it's a vessel that's containing it? It's two separate things. The shell of the grape and the grape juice are two separate things. It's just containing it. It's just a container. It's just holding it. And therefore, if it's just a container, so even though the grape itself is impure, the shell is impure, an impure person touched it, it's impure, but the grape juice is pure. The grape juice is pure. It's two separate things. And in order to impart impurity, you have to have a beya. You have to have, we learn from the Torah, it says something you can eat, something you can swallow at one time, which is an egg. So it has to be the size of an egg in order to transmit impurity. So the shell cannot transmit impurity to the grape juice that's contained inside the shell, inside the grape. If you say it's one, then the whole thing is tamei.
It's not like you throw away this shell like you like a nut, like a walnut or something, and you throw away the heavy
No, but you squeeze. You're squeezing out, and you're squeezing it in a way that you don't touch. You don't touch. You're squeezing it with a wooden utensil or whatever in a way that you're not contaminating it with something that your hands are not touching the juice, the grape juice. Or so therefore that wine I'm allowed to use. I'm allowed to use it even in the Beis Hamikdash. It's pure. There's no impurity because the wine is just contained in there. The grape can't impart the impurity to the juice. And even though when you touch the grape, so why don't you say that because mashke, liquid, even a drop of liquid becomes impure. Yeah, but it's not called liquid yet. Until you squeeze it out, it's not called liquid yet. So it's a separate entity from the grape. The grape is impure, but the liquid is not. The liquid is pure. The liquid remains pure. Now, there's an argument whether you need a beya, you need the size of an egg to impart impurity, but even a tiny drop of food could receive impurity. And that's what Rashi says in the beginning. But then Rashi changes his mind, and Tosfos also says no, that even to receive impurity, it has to be the size of an egg. So he says, so grape, that was this. So you squeeze it out less, as long as the grape is less, or a few grapes at a time, less than an egg, the volume of an egg. And then the wine is kosher and sachar. Because the grape, even though when the juice comes out, it's touching the grape, but the grape is not the size of an egg. It doesn't have can't impart impurity to the grape juice. Alma we see, so mashke mifket pkidi, it's a container, it contains the grape juice. So the question is, le'emes kametame. When does it become tameh? L'chisachet. When he squeezes it out. Less than l'shiyuri. When he squeezes it out, it doesn't have the amount. It's not the volume of an egg, so it can't impart impurity to the grape juice. That's against Gebeitz and Nami. Why do you have to say less than an egg? Even an egg. Because the moment you squeeze, it becomes less than an egg. The moment you squeeze the first drop, it's less than an egg, the volume of an egg, and therefore the impurity cannot impart impurity to the grape juice. That now we learn the Mishnah Tamim Meishu Shachas Esim Adnadin Kibetzim Uchavenis Teherim. Someone who's Tamim Meis, who came in contact with a corpse, and if he squeezes olives and grapes like the size of an egg, exactly an egg, the tar. Why? Because the moment he squeezes it out, then he diminished the volume. It's no longer an egg, it's less than an egg, and therefore cannot impart impurity on the squeezed oil and grape juice. And with the Gemara, Hasam there, the Yavad Hach, it's only after the fact. Initially, we say you shouldn't do that. Because it's a decree, Dilma, perhaps, it's very hard to be exact. Maybe it'll be a drop more than an egg. So even after the first drop, you squeeze the first drop, there's still a volume of an egg that could impart impurity on that drop. And once that drop is impure, then everything is impure. Amalei Rav Chisda said to him, "Man sayes l'chol Rabbi Yechon Rabbi, who's going to listen to you? We disagree with you. Your whole halacha makes no sense. Where did this impurity go? Of course, the grape juice is impure, and you're not allowed to use that grape juice for the temple. Why? What's he's arguing? Alma we see kasavar. Rav Chisda holds mashkin mivle bli. We don't look at it as if it's a container, as if the grape is a container and it's containing the grape juice. No, it's swallowed up. It's part of the grape. So v'chiven the itmalei uchle itmalei mashkin. If the grape is impure, the grape juice is also impure.
According to the first opinion, when you squeeze it out, right, isn't it then going to touch the outside?
Yeah, but when it touches the outside, it's less than the volume of an egg.
Yeah, but that's only if it drop straight down. It doesn't sit somewhere. And where's the juice going? I guess it's funneling down or something, I guess. Meaning if not, you're going to have a whole vat of grape juice.
No, but the juice itself is pure.
But it's touching all the peel.
Yeah.
No, but the peel, when the peel the moment it comes in contact, when the peel comes in contact with the juice, the grape is less than a beya. So even if it comes in contact with it can't metame it.
Oh, each individual grape becomes smaller.
What they're saying here is don't crush a whole lot of grapes at once, and
Yeah.
just one or two at a time, and you're less
Yeah.
than the beitza.
Amalei says, Vatle Tizra, the Mashkin, yeah. So he responded, Vatle Tizra, the Mashkin Mifgit Begida, you don't agree with me that the liquid, the grape juice, is considered as if it's contained in there. It's not part of the grape. But now we learn the Mishnah. The Mishnah that we just quoted clearly, that someone who came in contact with a corpse, if when he squeezes olives and grapes, if it's exactly the volume of a beitza, then it's Torah, because the moment you squeeze out the first drop leaves it, you no longer have the volume of a beitza to impart impurity. So if you're going to tell me, like I said, that it's a container, that's why it's Torah, because the juice inside was never, the oil inside was never impure. And the moment you squeeze out the first drop, there's not enough volume to impart an impurity. But according to you, that you hold, if you're going to say, mivla it's swallowed up, why is it pure? The moment the olive and the grape is impure, the oil and the juice is also impure. Amalei, so he responded. Chisda responded, you know what we're talking about over here. We're talking about grapes that never were qualified to receive impurity. They never were huchsher, because there was never any liquid on them. The Mishnah that says that a tamei mace could squeeze it. When does it become qualified? When you squeeze it. So then that juice, oil and wine are the juices that qualify a fruit. That's only
Whether it was a tummy maze, couldn't be.
There's not enough for shear. He's saying there has to be a shear to qualify. Even to qualify, there has to be a kibetza. So once it's ready to be qualified, because you squeezed out the first juice, it's no longer a beya, so it can no longer be qualified. So even there, we're talking about the grape itself is pure, and the olive itself remains pure, not just the inside. If you're not going to say this, we learn the Brais. We learn now. He's going back. Why he's bringing this whole Gemara here, this whole argument here. We learned earlier. Rabbi Kiva argued. Rabbi Kiva was arguing. Rabbi Kiva was saying that you should be the argument here about Kiva and Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri. Rabbi Kiva says that you don't have to pay anything. If you ate trumas, chametz, and pesach, you're exempt because it's worthless. I didn't take anything away from the kohen. Rabbi Akiva said, Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri, why should you pay? Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri said, why do you pay if you eat truma tameya? The kohen can't eat it, and nevertheless you have to pay. So why is this any different? So Rabbi Akiva says, no, there is different. There, at least I can use it for fuel. But here I can't use it for fuel. He says, you know what it's like. He compares it to when throughout the rest of the year. If a Yisrael eats truma, he eats berries or he eats grapes that are tamei, you don't have to pay anything. Why don't you have to pay anything? Because it's worthless. It's worthless because the kohen can't eat it. It's tamei, and you can't use it for fuel. It's moist. It has juice. You don't use grapes for fuel. You don't use berries for fuel. Okay. The question is, what are you saying? That grapes you can't use for anything? Of course, according to you, there's a good usage for it. What? According to you, take one grape at a time. The grape is less than the size of an egg. So even though the grape is impure, squeeze it out, and you have grape juice.
Drop by drop.
And you have grape juice.
Yes. No, that's still good.
No, the grape is less than the beya. So I can not only can I use it for benefit, I can use it for food. So surely there you should pay according to you. According to me, it makes sense. If the grape itself is tamei, then the inside is also tamei. But according to you, I should even be able to eat it.
So what's the
Rabbi says you're right, you would be. But we made a decree that you're not allowed to. You shouldn't give to the kohen. You're not allowed to keep around these grapes that are tamei, because we're worried that if it sticks around, you're going to come to eat it. You're going to come to it sitting around on the shelf. It doesn't say written on it tamei. It's not like it's yelling it's tamei. It's like any other grape. So by mistake, you can come to eat it, and instead of squeezing it, you can come to actually eat the grape itself. You're going to come to a stumbling block. Are we afraid of a stumbling block? But Tani, we learned the Brais Madlikin Bepas Ubeshemesh Shel Trumash and Itmaz. Oh, what's that? Okay. We learned the Brais. You're allowed to light Bepas. You're allowed to light Bepas Ubeshemesh Shel Trumash and Itmaz. You can light the oven. You can use it. That's fuel. Truma. That's a pas. That's a tameh. And oil of truma that became tameh. So the question is why? Same question. Why are you allowed to use it for fuel? Maybe you come to eat the bread. Maybe you come to eat the oil. So Rabbi responded, "Amalei pas zadik lebeneitz pas. You throw it between the wood, so it becomes dirty. It's dirty bread. You don't keep it in the shelf. You throw it. You keep it with the wood, with the coal. So therefore, you're not going to eat it. It's disgusting. Shemen shel truma dam lebekleim mos. You're right. Shemen shel truma. You have to put it in a disgusting vessel, something that you wouldn't use for oil for your salad. You don't put it in your fridge or in the cupboard. You put it in something disgusting. So you're not going to come to eat it. You're only going to come to use it for fuel. Gufa, the text itself, we learn Matlikim Pasam Shem Shel Terum Shem Tma, Zabaya, Shem the Chizki, the way that we said Marta, they said Loishon, Pas, Avachiti Loy, only bread. But kernels of wheat, no. Why? Because there we are worried because it doesn't get dirty. It's kernels. I don't care if it gets dirty. You wash it off and you can still use it. Rabbi Yechanan, no. Rabbi Yechanan says that even chitim also you're allowed to use. Why? You can easily wash it off, even if it's if you put it between the wood. Ravashi says, we're talking about after it becomes impure, you cook it very heavily, and then you throw it between the wood. So that's the argument. Rav Huna allows even in that case, because he holds maybe you'll eat it before you cook it. Before you get around to cooking it, since you have to do something. Bread, you just throw it into the oven. You don't have to do anything else. Very easy. But chitim, you can't just throw it between the wood. Here it's not enough just to throw it in the wood. You have to cook it first. So before you get around to cooking it, you may come to eat it. That's what Rav Huna says. Chitim no. Rav Huna says chitim yes. Chitim not. Rabbi Yechanan says no. Even Rabbi Yechanan holds that there's nothing to fear. Since it's all cooked, there's nothing to fear. And Rabbi Yechanan says, I am fearful. Even chitim I'm not allowed to. Chitim not, because before you come to eat it, before you come to cook it, you may come to eat it. And Rabbi Yechanan says, no, even chitim I'm allowed, because you can cook it. I'm not worried that before you're going to cook it, you're going to come to eat it. And what did Ravashi say this? We're in 34a and top. Abba Shol was the kneader of Beis Rebbe. It was an honor to knead for the household of Rebbe. They used to heat up the oven with the kernels of Truma Tmeya. It was very cheap. Because Truma Tmeya, what's a kohen going to do? He can't eat it. So it was very cheap. He couldn't do anything with it. Only a kohen, it's Truma. Only Truma is a problem. And not Truma, there are plenty of impure people, you can eat it. The Jews can eat it. But Truma is a problem. You can't eat it. It's holy. So there's very little, I can't use it as bread. So it's fuel. It's very cheap. So it's a cheap fuel. Cheaper than gas. he used to buy chitna shel Truma Tmeya, lolosh ben, to need. Isa betar. The question is, why? Why did he allow it? Maybe you'll come to a stumbling. Because if you're going to leave it around, you just said, if you're going to leave it around, you may come to eat it in a state of impurity. It's impure, you won't realize. So he said, and this Rav Ashi answered, the first he would cook it very well. So it's not hard anymore, it's soft. And then throw it to the wood. Now it's disgusting. There's no way in the world I'm going to come to eat it. And that's how you would eat it. We'll stop over here. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful